In the Dragon Ball franchise, audiences have been introduced to a number of incredibly powerful characters throughout the duration of the story. Goku, Vegeta, Gohan, Beerus, Whis, the Grand Priest, all of them who could make the very reality that they occupy crumble around them. However, in the shadow of these fighters, there are also a number of incredibly strong characters that are often overlooked by fans, and actually seen as being weak, when in fact, they're incomprehensibly powerful, and make most of fiction look like ants by comparison. One of these such characters is the fighter Krillin, Goku's best friend, who has been alongside him on his journey for greater strength ever since the original Dragon Ball. Right now, most fans consider Krillin to be weak and utterly irrelevant. But what if I told you that Krillin is actually incredibly powerful? In fact, he's far more powerful than you can possibly imagine. Well, I'm going to explain exactly that in this video, by running through Krillin's history of power in the Dragon Ball franchise, and explain to you exactly who he scales up to right now in the story, and just what characters most fans consider to be incredibly powerful, Krillin could effortlessly defeat at this point in Super, showing you that Krillin is by no stretch weak. So let's take a look at the original Dragon Ball series, and despite the fact that Krillin might not have really ever truly been as powerful as Goku during that point, he certainly was able to keep up with him and stay relatively close behind him during the course of the story, even giving him a really good fight during the 22nd tournament, before Goku eventually went on to fight Ten Shinhan in the main event. Krillin himself also put up a good fight against Piccolo Jr. during the 23rd tournament, and was never portrayed as being weak or any kind of a slouch during the entire story. Sure, he was killed by Tambourine, who was one of King Piccolo's henchmen, but even Goku was defeated by Tambourine when he was still recovering from his fight with Tien. And Goku was also defeated by the old King Piccolo before he even got his youth back and powered up again. Even Tien, after training with Master Roshi and learning the Mafuba, still didn't stand a chance against King Piccolo and was ultimately defeated by Drum, one of his own henchmen. And this is the same Tien who beat Goku in the 22nd tournament's main event. So again, all throughout that original series, Krillin was kept relevant, and by the end of it, Krillin definitely could have beaten Goku in every single previous arc before that. Now going into the next arc, Goku was stronger than Krillin, at least at the start. However, this dynamic changed after Goku was killed by Piccolo, because while Goku was running along Snake Way, Krillin and the other humans trained under Kami, and during this point, all of them surpassed Raditz, and also Goku and Piccolo from the start of the arc during that point, which means that for the first point in the story, Krillin was actually stronger than Goku, at least until Goku got to King Kai's planet, trained under the 10 times gravity, and then learned the Kaioken. Another thing to keep in mind here is that during the fight against Nappa and Vegeta, Krillin was actually the one who was able to get the closest to killing Nappa, because even though he wasn't the most powerful, he arguably performed the best at the time, being able to take out multiple Cybermen and nearly killing Nappa with his Kienzan. If it wasn't for Vegeta telling Nappa to get out of the way, Krillin would have cut his head off, which goes to show you that despite the fact that Krillin wasn't necessarily as powerful as Piccolo or perhaps even Tien at that point, he still was more dangerous than arguably either of them, which we also saw as Goku took on Vegeta. Because despite the fact that Goku is far more powerful than all of the other fighters at the time with his Kaioken, with the exception of Ozaru Vegeta, after Goku's body broke down and he got his bones crushed, Krillin along with Gohan and Yajirobe were three fighters who were actually able to fight off Vegeta and ultimately led to his defeat, with Krillin being the one who was chosen to wield Goku's Spirit Bomb and cast it at Vegeta, and would have additionally killed Vegeta with Yajirobe's sword if it wasn't for Goku telling him not to. So again, Krillin definitely played a big part there, as he did during much of the Namek saga, where Krillin's power only continued to skyrocket even more when he encountered the Grand Namekian Elder and had his hidden potential unlocked, which allowed him to go from being weaker than Nappa to being more powerful than Goku and Vegeta from the prior arc, and even stronger than members of the Ginyu Force, including perhaps Captain Ginyu, which can be argued in part due to him being able to flee from second form Frieza, and also being able to cut off his tail with his Destructo Disc, and additionally because of Vegeta's statement where he stated that both Gohan and Krillin's power continued to grow even stronger, either because Guru's potential unlock was something that happened over time, so that the longer it went on, the further their their potential continued to be drawn out, which I suppose makes more sense than the alternative, which is that Toriyama forgot that Krillin wasn't a Saiyan and just kept giving him Zenkai after Zenkai with each fight, and then Dende of course healing him. But regardless, by the end of this arc, it's arguable that Krillin was the strongest human, even being stronger than the humans who are also training on King Kai's planet. Which means that Krillin went from a power level of being in the low hundreds to being stronger than pretty much all of Frieza's army and most living beings in the universe in less than a year, which is a pretty massive power up, and it shows that more than just the Saiyans and Piccolo got huge boosts during the Namek saga. But the thing is that Krillin only continued to get stronger from there, because after this we saw the arrival of Future Trunks, the Super Saiyan from the dystopian future, who went on to kill an even stronger version of Frieza, known as Mecha Frieza, and his father King Cold, after which he revealed to Goku the existence of the androids, created by the evil Dr. Gero, who killed all of the Z fighters and went on to decimate the Earth, enemies whose power was so great that they put even the Super Saiyans to shame. It was after this point that Piccolo went on to tell everyone what would happen within 3 years, and that he and the Saiyans would train during that time, and that everyone else shouldn't show up if they didn't think that they could help, with a lot of that really being aimed at the humans. And yet, despite all of that, Krillin still trained and showed up even stronger than ever, alongside Tien and Yamcha. Now, considering the fact that Krillin, Tien, and Yamcha all sense the power of Super Saiyan Trunks as well as Frieza and his father on display during that fight, and they also sense the power of Super Saiyan Goku, and Krillin himself was on planet Namek and even fought against Frieza at various points, and as a result knew just how powerful these androids would have to be, he would have likely had to have had a power level in the millions to have even shown up at this point. Otherwise, why would he even consider doing so? Now, there's a lot of people who completely draw the line here when it comes to the humans, but honestly, that's not really that hard to believe. After all, the base Saiyans themselves have power levels in the millions, and then on top of that, they have a 50 times multiplier when they transform into Super Saiyan. So having the humans be somewhat relative to the base Saiyans isn't really that difficult to believe, especially when the humans have that Super Saiyan transformation that they're trying to catch up to, because they themselves don't have any additional form that they can go into. Whereas the Saiyans kind of have that as a crutch, which probably ultimately actually limits the increase that their base form would get. And even though Krillin himself never fights the androids, we do have a little bit of circumstantial evidence that helps to back this up. For instance, when Yamcha shows up at the city that Android 19 and 20 show up at, and they scan him and say that he has incredible power, and initially believe that he's actually Goku. Additionally, as we see later on, Dr. Gero is anticipating Goku's power level to be in the millions, considering that he believed that 19 himself would be capable of defeating Super Saiyan Goku. Furthermore, even though Krillin doesn't fight 17, 18, or 16, in the anime version of the story he does fight Imperfect Cell, when Cell is chasing a family trying to absorb them, and Krillin is actually able to hold him off and damage him with a headbutt and allow a family to escape in a plane during all of this happening. Now of course, Krillin was at a power disadvantage here, but Cell at this point was stronger than Frieza, and probably somewhat comparable to Android 18 after having some of the absorptions here. So this alone is an incredible feat of power, whether you want to include it or not. And let's not forget that Krillin also managed to hurt Super Saiyan Grade 4 Goku with a rock, so clearly he's ridiculously powerful. Nah, I'm just kidding. We all know that it was really the rock. That thing could easily solo Frieza, King Cold, their army, and the androids combined. Confirmed! And later on near the end of the arc, Krillin is also one of the Z fighters who goes on to fight the Cell Juniors during the Cell games, enemies who are said by Goku to be incredibly powerful and are actually able to beat Goku up when he's tired in his Super Saiyan form. Now the implication is that they were holding back somewhat to torment the Z fighters rather than to kill them at the time, and Krillin isn't doing the best out of everyone, but Krillin still can hold his own a little bit here and there. And after this, Krillin finally found what he was looking for since Dragon Ball Z began. No, not his nose, but a girlfriend. Settling down with Android 18, marrying her, and having a daughter, Marin. Living a peaceful life and no longer training. even growing out his hair, which he had shaved since he was a child. During this point, Krillin likely lost power, yet he was still called the strongest human by Yamcha during the tournament in the early Buu saga. Now you can perhaps argue that Yamcha was humoring Marin because Krillin was up against Pintar, a giant man, and Marin didn't really know any better, but at the end of the day, all of this is written by Toriyama, so it could be his narrative intention that this is the case. Another thing is that whether you believe Tien is stronger than Krillin here is also up for debate. He certainly could be, and it definitely would make sense, because after all, he was more powerful than him at the end of the original Dragon Ball, and Tien always trained where Krillin took breaks, and even during Krillin's big boost on Namek, Tien was also getting specialized training with King Kai. But I know that many people count Tien as an alien because of guide entries like this that mention him as being a member of the Three-Eyed Clan. However, even then it still says that he's a descendant of that race, and from my own interpretation, it seems more along the lines of him being a half-breed or a mixture of human and whatever that was in the distant past, with perhaps them landing on the Earth and then intermixing with humans, with only certain kinds of techniques and Tien's 3 different eyes being leftovers from that species. So in that case, I'd still count Tien as human. Regardless, Krillin along with most characters weren't used very well here. However, when we get into Dragon Ball Super, Krillin starts to be used a lot more often, and also begins to train again. However, there was a little bit of break in his relevance, beginning with Battle of Gods, where he doesn't really do much of note other than hang out at a party that Bulma is throwing for her birthday, trying to fight Beerus, and getting beaten rather easily. After that, he gets a little bit more shine, getting a job as a cop, finding out that the Frieza Force is showing up to the Earth, having 18 shave his head and putting on his gi like it used to be, and then going off to fight them, and having some cool moments along the way. But then the next arc, the Tournament of Destroyers, he doesn't really do anything again other than being a spectator, but nonetheless he does observe the fights between Universe 6 and Universe 7, which definitely helps in terms of giving him an idea of the power level that he'll be able to compare himself against and be up against later on in the story, particularly after the Future Trunks arc where again he wasn't involved. That's when we finally get into the Tournament of Power, and that's where things really turn up for Krillin and show just how powerful he's become at this point in the story. But before that, we have the little lead up to it, which fans have different names for, but is often considered to be the Time of Peace arc, where Goku and Krillin actually train alongside each other under Master Roshi for the first time in many years, going into the Forest of Terror to get weed for Master Roshi. There they battle against their greatest fears, which are actually brought to life as projections, in which we see all the different characters who beat up or killed Krillin over the years, like Nappa, Tambourine, Frieza, Deborah, and even Super Shenron for some reason. I don't know why he's afraid of him, maybe because he ate him. And during this point, the seemingly rusty Krillin receives a very large boost in power, which also looks a lot like God Ki for some reason. And eventually, through his own focus in mastering his fear, is able to overcome the projections. Now of course, we don't really know how those projections compare in power to their real versions, but we do see Krillin destroy Super Shenron, who is an omnipotent dragon who is able to bring back the large majority of a multiverse that was erased by Zeno, so take that for what you will. But what we can really quantify here is Krillin's performance against Goku in their sparring match on a rooftop during the lead up to the tournament. This is where Krillin reveals his incredible power that he achieved during his off-screen training that he was doing shortly before this friendly bout, by unleashing a blast against base Goku which pushes him to the edge of the rooftop and almost causes a ring out. Now Goku is actually incapable of escaping this with just his base power alone, which forces him to become a Super Saiyan in order to stay in the fight. This feat alone puts Krillin's power at a massive level, because for those of you who will remember, base Goku here is more powerful than every character in Dragon Ball Z. After all, this is after he absorbed the power of Super Saiyan God into his body. Then after that, he trained with Whis, an angel who's more powerful than a god of destruction. He additionally achieved Super Saiyan Blue, and then went to the time chamber for 3 years with Vegeta before the Universe 6 tournament. And just at the start of the last arc, during the Planet Potafu mini arc, base copy Vegeta, whose power was equal to Vegeta's, easily defeated Super Saiyan 3 Gotenks, who was stronger than most forms of Buu. And speaking of Buu, Goku fought against Majin Buu after he trained and became Fit Buu, and yet he didn't even transform to fight him, but he did transform against Krillin. Another thing to note is that Goku got several times more powerful during his fights against Goku Black and Zamasu, as before the Future Trunks arc he required Super Saiyan Blue Kaioken x 10 to fight against Hit, yet afterward he was able to stalemate an even stronger Hit who had been training with just Super Saiyan Blue during their rematch, even destroying his time dimension. So this means by using the scaling we're given that Krillin here would be more powerful than every fighter in Dragon Ball Z, including the fusions. Because if Goku was still a lot stronger than Krillin in his base form here, then he would have simply revved up his power and slapped away or escaped the attack, rather than transforming into a form that would multiply his base power. And even then, Krillin still puts up a little bit of a fight against Super Saiyan Goku before the next phase of their fight. And of course, this doesn't mean that Goku is using the full multiplier of the form, but again, it's unnecessary for him to use that form at this stage of the fight unless it was required, which the writing of the scene shows it to have been to exceed his base strength. Remember, Goku wasn't yet trying to show Krillin a power beyond anything that he could comprehend. He was just trying to gauge his strength. But the most impressive feat of all came when Goku transformed into his strongest form at the time, Super Saiyan Blue, which by this point was far more powerful than when he debuted the form against Frieza and fought against Merged Zamasu. Now the reason for this is because Goku wanted to see how Krillin would perform against someone who is far more powerful than himself, because naturally there would be other fighters like this in the tournament. He also wanted to see if Krillin would keep his fighting resolve. That's when Goku and Krillin charged up their Kamehamehas and fired them at one another, starting a beam struggle. Now of course, Goku was holding back here, otherwise Krillin would have been vaporized. But far too many people use the idea of Goku holding back in the key control of Super Saiyan Blue to downplay and diminish the feats of virtually everyone who fights Goku in that form. Whether it's Krillin, Android 17, Gohan, or the various fighters that he uses on during the Tournament of Power. Every single one of them is written off as they're not strong, Goku is just suppressing himself to match their level, which totally ignores the narrative significance of Goku using the form to begin with. Remember, Dragon Ball is a written story, where every single choice made is a deliberate one, and some choices have more dramatic weight than others. So when the writers and animators have Goku transform into his Super Saiyan Blue form against someone, which is then accompanied by them surprising him to some degree, that's clearly trying to depict that the character themselves are strong, rather than Goku just holding back to the level of a much lesser form that he could also suppress without ever going blue, and with significantly less stamina drain. I mean, this is something we learned all the way back in the Cell Saga. People are ready to accept that the writing of Super is bad when it comes to Goku holding back in his forms that he doesn't even need to transform into, yet they aren't ready to accept it when it comes to Toei and Toyotaro just giving his friends massive off-screen power-ups to make them relevant. And this is exactly what happens with Krillin, as Goku uses the form to basically see how Krillin reacts to a no-win scenario. But during this, something surprising happens, as Krillin manages to push back Goku's blast temporarily. Now, regardless of how much power you think Goku is using here, it's obviously more than he was using before, otherwise it makes the entire demonstration pointless. Yet despite that, Krillin still manages to surprise his old friend and show his strength is far more impressive than anyone else believed, by pushing back Goku's blast even for the slightest moment. And again, even if you want to do the lowest of low balls here and say that Goku is only using 1.0000001 times his base power here, or hell, even 10 or 1% of his base power, as stupid as that is, that still means that Krillin is above everyone in Dragon Ball Z. Co-parter. We also get a sort of impressive feat from Android 18 here as well, when she knocks the Kamehameha out of Goku's hands to stop the beam struggle. Of course, 18's level of power is important here as well because of how Krillin compares to her during this arc, as not only did Krillin train with her before the Tournament of Power, which could explain his gains, or maybe hers, but then fights alongside her when it actually begins. In fact, Krillin actually does better than 18 against the blind fighter Majora during the tournament. Whereas 18 seems to be at a disadvantage, Krillin manages to fight evenly with Majora for a number of clashes, and then ultimately defeats him through strategy. And for those wondering, Android 18 is also far more powerful than she was during the Android arc, because she had a number of impressive showings during the tournament itself. herself, such as when she fights alongside Android 17 and Goku against powerful opponents, and is able to stand up within a technique described as having a force akin to a black hole. But her biggest feat of all would have to come down to when she defeated Ribrianne in her final kaiju form. And earlier in the match, we saw Ribrianne battling against Super Saiyan Vegeta in her lower forms, a fight that's actually featured in the OP at the start of every episode. So despite the fact that Krillin ended up getting eliminated in a really lame way by using Super's most annoying cliche of being caught off guard by Frost, the fact that he compares to a now stronger Android 18 and showed off the feats of strength that he did in this arc proves that he is vastly more powerful than the early Dragon Ball Z power levels that people claim he is or often apply to the humans, who aren't really that far behind him. I mean, just look at what Roshi did during the same arc. And in the Moro arc, Krillin and the others got even more powerful, trained together before the coming of the Galactic Patrol prisoners. And as we know, when fighters train together in Dragon Ball, they tend to scale up to one another at a faster rate than if they trained alone. We saw this in the Saiyan saga when Piccolo trained with Goku and Gohan, and also when Goku and Gohan went into the time chamber together. And during the fight against Moro's henchmen, even Yamcha bragged about being one of the 3 strongest Earthlings at that point, showing just how much their power must have climbed when they were training with Gohan and Piccolo. So all of that only further separates Krillin and perhaps the other humans even more from the strongest warriors in Dragon Ball Z. Now of course, Dragon Ball Super's power scaling is far from consistent, and it's obvious that Toei and Toyotaro didn't care about trying to make it line up with the prior series. Whenever they wanted a character to be relevant, they typically gained a massive off-screen power-up, which took characters from being totally irrelevant in the Buu saga like Roshi, 17, or Krillin, and made them a Googleplex times stronger and able to dodge attacks from Jiren, or in 17's case, able to just straight up fight him and exchange blows, despite his only known training being that he fought off space poachers for a decade. At this point, the strength of characters from Dragon Ball Z are so ingrained in the fans' minds that it's hard for them to believe that Krillin or the other humans could realistically defeat Buu saga level characters like Super Saiyan 3 Goku, Buhan, Super Vegito, Gogeta, and others. But the truth is that this is just how the franchise has always been. At the start of a new series, the most powerful characters from the last are always made irrelevant. Master Roshi, Tao Pai Pai, King Piccolo, Kami, and even Raditz to lump him in were all surpassed by the humans in a single arc. Each saga was usually surpassed by the next until the humans started to be pushed further into the background. And even at the start of Dragon Ball GT, we see that Goku, after his training with Oob, is capable of soloing pretty much everyone else around him at the time, and probably all of Dragon Ball Z, considering his performance against General Rildo. And Super's power scaling often makes GTs seem downright competent. Now that Dragon Ball Super is here and the story is shifted back to having the humans be more involved due to fan service and a lack of creativity, they're being given huge power-ups to once again surpass everyone else from the prior story, to catch them up and make them somewhat relevant, only this time without the same level of care that Toriyama took in his manga. There's no specialized training under Kami, no going into the time chamber, or drinking super secret magical water, no new solution like going into a brand new dimension, or Bulma creating a new form of science to give the weaker characters a chance, or even giving them like Iron Man armor or something like that. They don't even give them training under the characters that they've already introduced, like Whis, or even just Goku and Vegeta. Instead, they all just trained off screen, maybe with a vaguely stronger character who also trained off screen, and now they can match a level of Goku's power that he's also vaguely using. So that's ultimately why people have such a difficult time believing when I do a video saying how strong this franchise presents these characters as being, because they, unlike the writers, actually understand the ramifications of what this means and what comes along with making the characters as powerful as they are. That it means that fighters like Krillin, Tenshinhan, Yamcha can perform the same feats as the most powerful characters they scale up to, like blowing away solar systems and galaxies, screaming through dimensions, or destroying the entire macrocosm with the shockwaves of their punches alone. As a result, they think that I must be making a mistake, or anyone else who shares this opinion, simply by watching the anime or reading the manga, when in fact, it's the writers who are making the mistake, with that being the mistake of bad writing, one that they continue to make again and again, 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 and again. But with all of that being said, if you actually look at all of the feats and statements, it becomes clear that Krillin is now stronger than everyone in Dragon Ball Z's anime and the movies. And of course the manga. And if he ever fought them, he would totally make Super Saiyan 3 Goku from the Buu Saga, Buhan, Broly, Janemba, and even Super Saiyan 3 Vegito and Gogeta from the Buu Saga his bitch. Because that's just what Dragon Ball Super wrote. And that is why Krillin is far more powerful than you realize. And with power creep and inflation only continuing to grow with each arc, who knows just how powerful our chestnut-shaped friend will be when Dragon Ball finally comes to an end. Just think, at the start of the next series, Krillin might be even stronger than Lord Beerus. Make sure to subscribe and enable all notifications, so you can stay up to date with all of my videos. Thanks for watching, and make sure to stick around, because there's a lot more to come in the future.
Yeah, and you better subscribe.